What's up, guys, and let's get right into it. Animal ethics is a contentious topic not just amongst philosophers, but also amongst ordinary people. There are four common arguments that most people use to justify the harsh treatment or abuse of animals in society. Chances are, if you are watching this video today, you have heard at least one of these arguments deployed, and I'm going to deconstruct each one in order. So the first very common argument deployed by people opposing animal ethics is that animals have no soul, and that therefore animals are to be excluded from the scope of moral concern. Admittedly, most people who deploy this argument are approaching this issue from a theological perspective. Now, there are two main reasons why this argument is inherently flawed. The first is that the soul is not a scientific concept. In fact, there is absolutely no empirical evidence of a soul existing. And two, even if the soul were real, one would have to establish a consistent and meaningful connection between the possession of a soul and the inclusion of moral consideration. In other words, what does the possession of a soul have to do with whether or not we should consider treating someone with moral consideration? This is essentially a morally irrelevant distinction. In fact, one who approaches this morally irrelevant distinction from a theological perspective could argue against, this position. One could argue that because animals have no souls and therefore their sins cannot be recidified in the afterlife, that we are morally obligated to treat them better than we treat other humans with souls. Hence, the possession of a soul is just a morally irrelevant distinction, even if the soul were a scientifically real concept. This argument is essentially an appeal to in-group. It's an arbitrary distinction that one could make to morally uplift oneself or to morally devalue another. I could deploy the same kind of reasoning to argue that all people with blue eyes are different from me, therefore they should be excluded from the scope of moral concern, therefore shooting that person in the face is justified, even though the possession of blue eyes is morally irrelevant. However, if I were to shoot someone in the face to ward off child rape, then that's a morally relevant distinction. Another common argument is the human dominion argument, or humans have domination over non-human animals, therefore animals should be excluded from the scope of moral concern. This argument reasons that humans are the superior species sitting at the top of the evolutionary pyramid. First of all, most people who claim humans are the more evolved species, therefore this is a morally relevant distinction, have little understanding of evolution. Of course, I'm no biologist or anthropologist, but I do know that evolution is an arbitrary distinction, mainly because evolution is really just about survival and reproductive success, the likelihood of you being able to pass your genes on to the next generation. It can be simplistically described as a change in genetic characteristics over a couple of generations. This is entirely irrelevant when it comes to whether or not one should reside within the scope of moral concern. Also, in what way would this make us the superior species? And as humans, we get to decide what the criterion is for superiority. And if the criterion is speed or longevity or reproductive success, then humans are not at all at the top of the pyramid. And even if either of these categories was the criterion, they would all be arbitrary distinctions, just as arbitrary as drawing the distinction at the ability to use echolocation or to walk up walls. Overall, the human dominion argument essentially reasons that might makes right. It's the idea that those in power get to decide what is right and what is wrong, what is moral or immoral, and what is ethical and unethical. Which sounds great until you realize that one could use the same kind of reasoning to justify the Holocaust or the human slave trade. A very common third argument used, possibly the most common argument, specifically by moral deontologists, is that animals are not moral agents, therefore animals should be excluded from the scope of moral concern. This argument might also sound like animals are not social agents, therefore animals should be excluded from the social contract. Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the debate between Vegan Gains and Destiny, this is essentially Destiny's main argument. Morality really isn't just about what one can get. It's about what one can give, even if those actions cannot be reciprocated. This simple fact is why humans are compelled to treat the severely mentally disabled or the very senile elderly with compassion and respect, even though they cannot reciprocate those moral actions. In fact, there are people who avidly oppose the death penalty of actual convicted serial killers, rapists, and sociopaths. These are people who not only are not capable of reciprocating morality, these people are infringing on the well-being of other people, and yet some humans still oppose their execution. And similarly, even if one were to argue that animals cannot participate in the social contract, they're wrong. Animals, to some extent, can be taught to participate in the social contract. It's why dogs, even when they're hungry or angry, they don't bite or bark or growl. Dogs and cats, to some extent, can be taught to respect their owners, other people, and even their property. The fourth and most common argument against animal ethics is that humans are able to reason and animals are not. Non-human animals are not able to reason. Therefore, this distinction should exclude animals from the scope of moral concern, which is just entirely false, actually. Non-human animals like pigs, dolphins, and chimps have demonstrated a very limited understanding of basic mathematics and basic logic. Even animals like chickens have demonstrated that they have a possession of object permanence, which is the ability to reason that an object removed from sight must still exist. Side note, babies under 8 months are incapable of object permanence. Yes, chickens have better reasoning skills than babies under 8 months. So, tell me, does this distinction exclude babies from the scope of moral concern? Are babies under 8 months no longer moral objects because they don't have an ability to reason? Or are they still capable of pain and suffering? You see, even if this argument were correct, even if animals could not reason and all humans could reason, this would be an arbitrary criterion. Whether or not one can reason is irrelevant to one's capacity to feel pain and to suffer, which is why we don't accept this criterion when applied to other humans. For example, babies under 8 months or very senile elderly. Alrighty guys, this was a pretty short video. Thank you so much for watching. I do plan on making some more of these kinds of videos. If you have any more arguments against animal ethics that you'd like me to deconstruct, definitely put them down in the comment section. I'm not sure when the next video will go up, probably in about a week, because I'm really busy with school. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.